Good evening everybody, benvenuti all'Istituto Italiano di Cultura. This is the fourth program of our series about outstanding Italian women in the US. We start with a scientist, then we have a composer and an art curator, and tonight we have Lidia Bastianich. I think that I don't have to explain who Lidia Bastianich is. An author of books, and the last one is outside in the foyer, and you could buy, and Lidia will sign it for you, and it's a television star here in the US with Lidia's Kitchen, but also in Italy with MasterChef Junior and also La Prova del Cuoco. Is the chef and owner of 4 acclaimed New York City restaurants, Felidia, Vecco, Esca del Posto, and not only in New York. Is a partner in Italy, and so on. Is a fantastic woman. We are proud as Italian of what she did here in the US. As usual, Lidia Bastianich will be in conversation with Maria Teresa Cometto. And so, please welcome Lidia Bastianich and Maria Teresa Cometto, and enjoy.
Grazie.
Thank you for the introduction, Director. It's true that Lidia is very, very famous, but so many things in her new book are not known, I think, by the general public, and so we are going to discover step by step about the fantastic life of Lidia. Thank you, Lidia, for being with us this evening. I read all the book, and I was really touched by your story. I was impressed by the way you have faced so many difficult times, always with an optimistic attitude, and trying to make the best out of it, focusing on your future. So your story starts in Pola, Istria. That is not very well known. And also, very few people know that you were born not Lidia, but you were born Giuliana. Can you explain why your mom wanted to call you Giuliana?
Well, thank you, Maria Teresa. Welcome, everybody. Grazie, Direttore. Allora, Giuliana. And still, my mother, my brother, and my intimate family calls me Giuliana. I was born right at the cusp after the war. The communists were coming in. The Allied forces were sort of guarding the area before it was officially decided where the border would be after World War II. And at that point, my mother had me. I was born February, I said, 21st, 47. The actual Paris Treaty went into effect February 28, 1947. And it was an odd time. So my mother, having me, sent me to be baptized by her sister, whose name is Lidia, was Lidia. And she said, you know, give her the name, because at that point, even the church, everything was kind of hushed and limited. And so she said, give her the name Giuliana, because that area still is known as Friuli Venezia Giulia. The part of where Istria, Trieste, we are Giuliani. If I refer to myself, I'm a Giuliana. And she wanted to at least give me the name, no matter what happened to the actual division, at least she had a Giuliana in the family. But my aunt Lydia went to church, baptized me, and put Lydia first, Giuliana second. And so, but she didn't say anything to anybody. Brought me home, and my mother, Giuliana was. And so I was until I was going to school, and the papers were pulled out, and she's not Giuliana, she's Lydia. And so my name switched. Buonasera, benvenuto, grazie. So my name was Lydia, really, but still to this day I'm called Giuliana at home.
Well, your Nonna Rosa was your first culinary teacher. Do you have a recipe that is inspired by Nonna Rosa?
Oh, I think my whole culinary kind of enthusiasm, and it's all based in those first years with Nonna Rosa. So as the borders went down, my mother was an elementary school teacher, and she was being watched by the Secret Service people. She put myself and my brother in a little town outside of Pola, which is maybe 3-4 kilometers. But that little town, Grandma had her courtyard. We had all of the animals, chicken, duck, rabbit, goats. I would milk the goats with Grandma. We had pigs. We had Grandpa made olive oil. Grandpa made wine, and the whole garden, because food was becoming scarce. So Grandma, with her little plot of land and the animals, really provided food for the whole family. And so my brother and I, we were the little runners. We would, help to feed the animals, milk the goats. I would make ricotta with her. Remember where she had too much? We cook the polenta and so on. Even when every November the slaughter of the pig, and we would then the kids, we would run all over. But that was serious business, because that's when you made the sausages, the prosciutto, and I was involved in that. So, and of course the garden. I remember going and harvesting the potatoes in June. The potatoes is a bulb. You have to get the plant out, and gathering the potatoes after Grandma. She would kind of with the plow, and you take the potato in your hand and it's still warm. It really I still remember it. It's like if it had life, and all of those genuine and pristine flavors remained. And I think those are my reference library for those flavors, pristine, genuine. And even today when I cook, I can't help but recall and search in whatever I do for those flavors. And sometimes I find them and sometimes I don't.
So fantastic time with Nonna Rosa, but on the other hand, you mentioned the problem with the repression by the communist regime.
Oh, yeah.
And you wrote, for example, I quote from the book, we would hear stories of people, mostly ethnic Italians, being pulled from their homes in the middle of the night by members of the secret police. Their hands and feet were bound and they were dropped into foibe. Surprisingly, little is known about the foibe massacres. And again, you go on and you say, there was always deep-rooted concern that one day the authorities might come to my father, unquote. And in fact, one night they came, and your dad...
One night they did, because my father had a little business. He was a mechanic, but we had 2 trucks, and they deemed him a capitalist, took his trucks, and ultimately incarcerated him for about 6 weeks. And we didn't know the reason for the exception, that we thought. But certainly that we couldn't speak Italian, we couldn't go to church, and all of those civil liberties were taken away. And that's why with Grandma, we could do some of those things. Grandma would take us to church now and then, but not too often, because if we would have been traced, my mother would have been incarcerated. She was a teacher at the time. Now, you have to also understand that on a border situation, is quite moving. So you're born with multitude ethnicities and speaking several languages. Italian was at home, that was our language, but there was a little bit of Croatian there because the Slavic. There was German because of the Nordic. That area was also under the Austrian-Hungarian for quite a few times. So being on the border, you could oscillate before. But I think also what the advantage of that is that you kind of understand different ethnicities and comprehend people. Some of the things that, very parallel to what's happening today. And one of the things that really propelled me in writing my book now, because out there what's happening, it was quite similar to my experience.
Yeah, and it was exactly after your father was released that your mom decided to leave, right?
Well,
to leave Pola for
that was frightening, and because next time could have been the Foibe, you know, you just didn't know when. And the Foibe were, that area has a lot of caves that run very deep into, and they're still available there. I mean, they're still there, and that's where they would throw people alive. So it was, you know, it was quite, yeah. I mean, I was small, but yes, what propelled my parents was finally that, you know, we need to get out of here. But they wouldn't let the whole family get out. So as children, we weren't told. We had family on the other side of the border in Trieste. Trieste remained Italian. And supposedly, the great aunt, Zianina, was gravely ill. So my mother, my brother, and I, we got the visa. The whole family couldn't get the visa because they knew that you wouldn't go back. And so my father remained. We went over, and after about 2 weeks, my father joined. He literally escaped the border, escaped on foot, about 60 kilometers, barbed wired, fence, dogs chasing him, shots, but he made it. And we were reunited in Trieste after about 2 weeks.
Yeah. And Zianina was your second culinary teacher. What did you learn from her?
Well, Zianina was a great, she would cook for families, you know, that would invite her to cook and certainly pay for. So she was one of those personal chefs, but she had a finesse to it. And when we saw, just back up a little bit historically, when my father joined us in Trieste, then we knew as children that we're not going back. And the question was, you know, what do we do now? And he didn't have any papers, and our visa was expired. So we went to the police, and they said, you know, we have to take you in because there's a possibility that if you're caught without papers, you can be repatriated. And they registered us in the San Saba refugee camp, and we lived there for two years. But occasionally, after they vetted us well, and we lived there to await, you know, an immigration where we would go. And of course, my parents were hoping for America because, you know, we could have stayed in Italy, but Italy was also difficult in the aftermath of the war. They said, we are on our way, let's continue our trek. And you were, the discussion was in Trieste, the Zianina.
What you learned from Zianina?
Zianina, so I would, you know, from the camp, once they vetted us and they understood that we had no political ties, that we were not spies, or my parents were not, or whatever, that we were genuinely trying to escape communism and move into the world, they gave us a pass to go out. We could go during the day, but we had to check out and in. You had to come in, check in. And there was a woman, I remember her vividly, Signora Leonori in Trieste, and she had a child that was autistic, and asked if my mother would help with the child and teach him, give him private lessons. And in turns, she paid for me the schooling, and I went with the Canosiane, the nuns. And in the interim, I would help Zianina with her. And I remember Zianina, and then I'll get to the Canosiane too, because it's a continuum, a continuum of food.
Sure. Talking about food at La Scuola delle Suore Canosiane, you for the first time worked, had a job in a commercial kitchen, right? Because you had to pay for your meals, you didn't have money, so you helped in the kitchen. Did you ever think at that time that you would become a professional chef?
No, I never for a minute throughout my whole life with food, you know, until the actual minute came, that I would be a chef. I loved cooking. But, you know, Maria Teresa, I'll tell you maybe what was the pivotal moment in my life. And in retrospect, I only found that later of myself. When we found out that we are not going back to grandma, you know, for me it was dramatic, because I didn't say goodbye to Grandma, I didn't say goodbye to my animals, I didn't say goodbye to my friends, and it was really a big kind of stack, or big, like if you're uprooted, literally what I was. And I think, in thinking back, I began to cook. I began to recall my grandmother with the flavors, the essence of the food that she gave me. So food for me became a connector of emotions, a connector of the places, the memories, and it's been
a way of healing. You write in the book. Right?
Yes, it was, and I only realized that later. Why do I have this passion for food? Why specifically the food of the area? And I realized why now. But food has continuously through my life been my connector, been my communicator, and because food is so powerful.
Yeah. You lived for more than 2 years in a refugee camp. So being a refugee yourself, what do you think, what do you feel when you when you watch the news about today, refugees in Italy, in America too?
It's, I feel, I really do. I see, especially those children, the children that are intense and that run, and I remember when I was a child in that camp, and the camp was closed, and it was a dark place, it was a humid place, it kind of smelled of mildew. I still recall all of that because that, and most of all was frightening. Was frightening because I thought, will they take away my father, will they take away my mother? They did. When we first came in, they quarantined us. And when you're 12 years old, then you're being quarantined, you and your mother, and then take your father and your brother away. You don't know whether you're going to see them again. Completely undressed, deliced, whatever they did. So that was dramatic for me. And when I see those children out there, yes, children are joyous, at the moment, but I can feel what I felt, the insecurity and where am I going to go? Where are we going to be? And the insecurity almost, and I didn't want to seem to frighten my mother or my father. I remember my brother and I, we would kind of huddle together to keep this strength so that we would strengthen our parents so they wouldn't. But nonetheless, there was this intense kind of what's next, where are we going to have a home and all of that. And seeing those children there, I just realized how they feel. And hence, I'm just going to jump a bit forward. I get involved, because so many people were really instrumental in giving me the opportunity, making me who I am today, paving the way, in a sense, helping me pave the way, that I try to give back as much as I can. And one of the institutions that I'm working is with the United Nations, the US chapter, to fundraise. And they do fundraising to build schools in camps, in these refugee camps, because children in camps now miss 2 to 3 years of school. And as a child, if you miss 2 to 3 years of school, you are way behind in getting into the world and making a life for yourself. So I think that education, I was given that opportunity with the Canosiane, with that wonderful Signora Leonori. She's 90-something. I went to visit her last year. She lost the son that ultimately my mother was helping. He passed away last year, but I still visit her. But I was blessed that I had the opportunity to continue my schooling. But today it's not so. So when I see those children, when I see what's going on, and my book is non-political, it's human, it's my story, it's a real story, and just hope that this kind of gives strength to people out there, that they see or that they read it, that if somebody is given a chance and given an opportunity, the desire is great to make it happen, and they will make it happen.
So the great desire was to come to America. Why America? Your great-grandfather or somebody?
My mother's father did, he was a machinist on the ship, and he did come to America. Actually, he was a machinist on the Carpathia. Carpathia was the boat that went to Titanic, the first boat that reached the Titanic when so the world is kind of full of a lot of history. And so he was on the boat and coming back and rescuing whoever they could when they got there. But he came back, and especially when the regime changed and all that, he said to my mother, and my father, he was talking always about America. And then found out that, my parents, that's where, because he recommended you go and you'll find an open kind of welcome there.
So finally, in 1958, you were allowed to come to America, and you came to New York City. What is your first memory of the city?
Yes, in 1958, I remember all the details. Dwight Eisenhower was the president, and he opened the immigration for people fleeing communism, and quite a few, 40 families out of the camp. We came to JFK Airport, and they separated according to languages, because there were a lot of people fleeing from Eastern Europe, Hungary, Bulgaria, Poland. They were all fleeing and basically passing through. I don't know why, but Trieste was a passing point, I guess, because so they divided us in languages and put us on a bus, a yellow bus, I guess. I gathered it was a school bus, and we drove into Manhattan, and they put us in a hotel, Walcott Hotel. It was on 36th or 32nd Street, and between 6th and 7th Avenue. And from there, they settled us in a room. I remember the room. But what I remember was that we were coming from JFK, and we passed all of those Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. Now I know all the cemetery. So my brother and I were saying, "Are we going to die here? What?" And then in the distance you see the beautiful, the skyline of Manhattan, and we were so excited. And then when we came into Manhattan itself, all this kind of movement is extremely excited as children. I remember in the hotel, the elevator. We were up on the 5th or 6th floor. My brother and I up and down the elevator. That was our treat. And the Catholic Relief Services, the Italian government took care of our stay in Italy, and also in bringing us here with the Red Cross as well. And we went to a social worker, spoke Italian, and they began our life first. They gave us a certain amount, I think it was $16 or $18, for my mother's to feed us for the week. And I recall, because, my mother was quite frugal, and she was afraid that she was going to have to return all this money, and she didn't have a job, and how is this going to happen? And so our meals for the first week was Wonder Bread, bananas, and milk. It was good. I mean, loved bananas. Wonder Bread was kind of almost like cake at the time. But then eventually, slowly, they found a job for my father, a little home for us in North Bergen, New Jersey. And there, I must say, again, the same people and the Italian community in New Jersey was very kind and strong. They brought in chairs and towels and food. So, we had nobody here, and we didn't speak the language. So it's not that we had a family, that we came to a family. Then you sort of find your way. But it was the great goodness of a lot of people that got us here. And, if you follow my trek, certainly, it's bare bones. And yet, here I am today. So it's...
So how was your first experience with the American food here? So in the book, Lidia tells the story when you wrote a big box with food given by the charity in your new home in New Jersey. And so, quote, "Most items were a mystery. We sat down around the kitchen table and took turns sticking our fingers into the various packages, having small tastes, then trying to guess what they were. The most baffling was Crisco. My mother suspected it was floor wax. And her finger taste test confirmed it was. So was that more funny or more depressing?
No, it was all a discovery. You know, when you're young, you just want to discover everything. So tasting everything, absolutely. You know, we had to find our way through it. Then my brother and I slowly learned English, and word by word we could decipher. But absolutely, you know, the shopping, going to shopping. A lot of time in the beginning, especially the Italian immigrant women from the communities, they have organizations, church organization, would come with us and would really help us shop, would help us buy things. They found a job for my mother. Now my mother was a teacher, but she couldn't, of course, speak the language. She became a seamstress. You know, every Italian woman knows a little bit of sewing, at least in my age group or earlier. And so they found a job for her. They found, after my father had found, the social worker had found this job for him with Chevrolet, actually. But the Italian community came to get him, took him to the local barber. He says, at the local barber, all the local Italian comes, and somebody will get you a job, will find a job for you. And this was how it sort of expanded and the communication happened. And we did. We began to settle. And then we ultimately did find a distant cousin who had jumped ship, as you say. And he was in Astoria, and he brought us to Astoria, and we started our life in Astoria, you know, as it is now. Maybe then it was very Italian, German, and Greek, and it was a great place, actually, to kind of begin one's life.
But at the beginning, as you said, you didn't speak English, and sometimes at school you felt ashamed because of that. How did you overcome that feeling?
Well, I think, you know, as a teenager, you're very conscious of yourself, and, you know, you want to enter into the community of the same group, you know, and how do you enter? You don't speak the language. So, you know, I was determined to learn English as fast as I could and become part of this community as fast as I could. I do remember, that was still in New Jersey, that a teacher, I think a well-meant teacher, took me, I had just been there a few days, and took what I think was one of the best students and put me outside, like on the steps, for her to teach me one-on-one English. Well, I was devastated. I was devastated because I says, oh, I don't belong, they don't want me, you know, all of these things that teenagers would have. But Maria, I think that all of these things made me who I am, made me more resilient, maybe more, yes, I'm going to get over this hurdle, and yes, I'm going to get over the other hurdle, and so on. And I think that in retrospect, even though we speak about all of these things, I don't think until now people knew I don't have an animosity or regret or hate or anger for anybody. I just know that there were a lot of great people along the way that got me to where I am.
Great. Your first summer job. You were a salesperson at a bakery, and with the money you earned, of course you helped your family, but you bought something that you desired. And I was struck by reading that what you had long wanted and finally bought was a frozen TV dinner.
Yes.
And when you ate it on your TV tray table, you exclaimed, "I am American."
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you had such a sophisticated taste for good food. So how come you wanted a TV frozen?
Well, I wanted to be American, and I wanted to explore America. You know, I think along the way, some of the first things back in that hotel, eating yogurt Jello for the first time, grapefruit for the first time. So it was a lot of discoveries. But yes, when we moved to Astoria, and I wanted to buy, I was 14, 15, I wanted to buy an island stockings. And my mother bought one pair, and of course I had to run the first day. So she says, I'm not buying you anymore, you wear Bobby socks. So I said, I need to get to work, I need the little things that any girl at 14 needs. And I went across the street, and it was Walken's Bakery, and that's Christopher Walken, the family of Christopher Walken. I was 14, I lied, I told them I was 16, they took me, and I became a sales girl on Saturdays and Sundays. And him and the other two brothers would come regularly, and they would deliver the wedding cakes. Well, I was sometimes in the back baking or whatever. And we're still friends today with Christopher Walken. He still comes over. So some relationships that you build. But yes, we lived now next to our cousin, which was great. Now we had some family, and the furnishing of the house. We didn't buy everything new. A lot of the things either people gave us, or sometimes we even found in the street. And this particular TV tray, I remember it well. It was, with the brass legs, and you open it up, and then you can clip it, and it had wonderful flowers on top of it. So by then we had gotten a second-hand TV, and my mother wasn't going to buy a frozen meal for me. I got myself a nice frozen meal. I heated it up in the oven, put it on that tray in front of the television, sitting on the couch, and I said, "This is America."
Very cool. So you opened your very first restaurant in Astoria, and before opening it, you did some research about the Italian-American cuisine. And so what did you discover? What's different from the Italian cuisine?
Well, fast forward, yes, I went to school, I met my husband. He was also an immigrant from the same area, but he came here by himself. And he worked in restaurants. He was a waiter, a maitre d', and he ultimately dreamed of opening his restaurant. So by then we had our first child, and I, short of making this work, but I did cook for the family because my mother was still working late, so at home at night I continued to cook the family meals, help mom cook the family meals. And when he decided, I would like to open a restaurant, I said, okay, I'll help you. And we did. The first restaurant was actually in Forest Hills. It was a small 9-table restaurant, and we put all the money that we saved, my mother's money, everything, but we opened the restaurant. And of course I wasn't the chef, so we hired an Italian-American chef because all the restaurants had this Italian-American menu, which wasn't what we were cooking at home, but the restaurants were all full. And this is what, America seems to think of as Italian food. And he was wonderful. He was a great chef in the Italian-American. I became his sous chef, and for 9 years I worked with him, and hence really honed my skills in running a restaurant kitchen and learned the Italian-American cuisine. Now, the Italian-American cuisine is a venerable cuisine. It's not the cuisine that you eat in Italy, but it's a cuisine that expresses this history, the story of the Italian immigrants. And I think that the Italian-American cuisine, the first big influx of Italian immigrants at the end of the 1800s came from basically 3 regions: Sicily, Calabria, and Campania, around Naples. And the Italian-American cuisine is really based in the flavors of those 3 regions. But it is based in the memories of those 3 regions, cooked with the ingredients that they found. At that time, you didn't have here arborio rice for a good risotto, or good olive oil, or the San Marzano tomato. Even though tomatoes were brought to Italy by the discovery of the New World, Italians have a way in growing vegetables or whatever. And the San Marzano, the plum tomato, is unique because it is very pulpy, very little juice, few seeds. Seeds have tannins, make the sauce bitter. And hence the Italian-American Sunday sauce, instead of being cooked in Italy, because I went back to Naples, to a friend of mine. I said, I want your mother to make for me the Sunday sauce. And it was the plum tomatoes, was a piece of cottica. Cottica is the skin, salted skin of a piece of fresh pork. And in about an hour and a half, it was done. Here in America, the Sunday sauce is quite different. There's sugar, there's a lot of garlic, there's a lot of oregano. Again, those 3 regions, the one thing that they did bring with them was the dry spices, the oregano. So hence, a lot of oregano in it. It cooks forever because it is the tomatoes, the salad tomato is very watery and acidic, so it cooks forever until it reduces. And sugar, because there's a lot of pits, tannins, bitterness, so the change, and a lot of meat. the difference here in America, in the Italian-American food, is in the Sunday sauce, there is braciole, there's meatballs, there's sausages. That doesn't happen in Italy in the Sunday tomato sauce. And that also is very much reflective, because when the immigrants came here, and they were, some of them were needy of a good piece of meat. It was scarce, food was scarce. Here they could have meat. And meat meant living well. Finally, we kind of live well. And so they loaded the Sunday sauce with all of those meats. So it has all, even garlic. The Italian-American cuisine has much more garlic than you would find in Italy. That was one element that was the same flavor like in Italy. And they just overused it to make the flavors really feel like back home. So the excessive use of garlic has its own little history as well. But anyway, I was in with this guy. Then, because I was fascinated, I needed to do all the research and all of that on this Italian-American cuisine, because, I knew that I didn't eat that way at home, and where is the discrepancy? So for 10 years, we had that little restaurant. We opened another one, expanded. We sold those, and we opened in 81 Felidia.
Felidia, which was a big risk you took. You got almost bankrupt, right?
Almost.
So what kept you from quitting?
Well, there was this desire, this energy of not giving up, I guess, and just the challenge. But Maria, I'll first tell the story, and then I think I have a why for my kind of energy. Yes, in 1980 we started, we bought on 58th Street, started building, had a budget, we thought everything that one is supposed to do. But the brownstone, when we dug for the wine cellar, needed all underpinning, otherwise the building would have collapsed. Way over budget, time, we almost didn't open. We put all our money, my parents' money and everything, but ultimately we did open, and there I became the chef. And what I chose to do is to do regional Italian cuisine, because that's what we cook at home. So, the difference that at that point in 81, this woman chef was making iotta, risotto, polenta, guazzetto, all of this brovada. All of this was quite interesting to the press, and that's why they kind of came to see who is this woman and what is she cooking. And again, I came here, I was 12, so I had a lot of catching up to do on the Italian side. We would go every year with the family as a vacation to search up and down Italy. We still do that. And that's why my children are brought back in the business, because we drag them all over the place, and they really kind of got into it. But this endless research, because, I didn't know all of the regions of Italy. I didn't know what they all ate, but I made it my business to really get involved, and I still do. I still go there regularly, always hoping to find, and I do always find something new to bring back.
And you didn't give up? Why, you said?
The real reason I didn't give up, because we made it, we got loans from here and from there. But I think that the real reason, because my parents, many a time, we would find them kind of huddling and whispering. They thought that children don't hear, but children hear everything. That, did we do the right thing coming here? Maybe we should have stayed home. Maybe we should have stayed in Trieste. And so I think that my brother as well as my brother is quite accomplished in electronics, PhD, has 40 patents for IBM and so on. But both of us had this drive to prove our parents that what they did, their sacrifice that they made, was worth it. And we just had to make it. Until this day, my mother's 97, lives with me. When I come home, she'll want to know what happened. and I will tell her, because she's been part of this success story, if you will.
Yeah. So in Felidia, you were the chef, and you write in the book that in Felidia's early days, no one ever believed I was the chef. Because being a chef was a man's profession those days, and maybe still mostly. You explained that the biggest challenge for women in this industry is how to balance a family with such a demanding career. How did you manage to
It
find
is.
the
It is.
balance?
I think maybe it's the Italian sentiments and closeness of family. Even though it was just the four of us, then it expanded to my immediate family and my brother. He got married and whatever. But we always bonded, and I must absolutely give credit and my mother and my father, because if it wasn't for them, I couldn't have, been working, having children. Because after we opened our first restaurant, the second year, Tanya, my daughter, was born, and that I always get asked this from women in the industry, and I felt, we owed a lot of money. I promised my husband that I would be with him. I love what I did. And yet I had a baby at home, and I felt guilty, so what is my role, which a lot of women are. And at that time, I wasn't, there was no psychiatrist, but I was torn. I went to the pediatrician, I remember him, Dr. Stein. He was wonderful, he was smart. He said to me, Lydia, explained to him, and he said to me, Lydia, children want happy families. So you continue, do what you need to do. Get your children involved as much as you can with you. Keep them close and make them feel that they are part of what you're doing and of your success. And I always did that. And even though when they became teenagers and hanging around the bar, I didn't like too much, and I would tell them, no, this is not what you want to do. You need to get an education and get a real American job. My son did get his master's, business, Wall Street, bond trader, and so on, came back to the industry. My daughter, Georgetown, Syracuse, PhD from Oxford, Renaissance art history, and is in the industry with me with the books and all of that. So they got, then I had to take them back. and I'm grateful for it.
Luckily so. Before we continue our conversation, and I have many more questions, and also you will be able to ask Lidia your questions. Just a few minutes for the General Consul Francesco Genuardi, who wanted to say ciao to Lidia.
Francesco, grazie. Grazie della visita.
A big ciao and a big grazie for an amazing we are very proud of you, of your story, not just for what you accomplished, but also, today when you told it, for how you're telling this story. Because it's a very vivid, funny way, but it shows that you are a woman full of humanity, and you reflect the best of, I think, of Italy and of New York and New Jersey, because part of your education was in New Jersey. Quindi grazie, viva l'Italia, viva Lidia e viva New York.
Grazie della visita.
Devo andare via.
Sì, vado. Grazie.
Yeah. Okay. We can restart with the 2 minutes video that I found on YouTube, which is the debut of Lidia on TV with your friend Julia Child, a great chef. Donatella, can we put it on?
Yes, but
I've always
She had-
loved real Italian pastas and risottos, but I never lived and cooked in Italy, and I just never felt I had the right touch. So I was just delighted when Lidia Bastianich invited us into her own home kitchen for a family meal and a lesson. Lidia was born in northern Italy, and by the time she came to New York when she was 11, she'd already been cooking with her mother and her grandmother, and then in restaurants with her great-aunt Nina. Lidia kept up.
when one talks about the Italian table, pasta always comes to mind. as the main staple.
So I was just delighted when Lidia Bastianich invited us into her own home kitchen for a family meal and a lesson. Lidia was born in northern Italy, and by the time she came to New York when she was 11, she'd already been cooking with her mother and her grandmother, and then in restaurants with her great-aunt Nina. Lidia kept on cooking when school permitted and always during vacations, and by the time she married, she and her husband Felice felt that she'd had enough experience for them to open their own restaurant. Now they're owners of Lidia, one of New York's best and most popular Italian restaurants. She also finds time for lecturing and teaching, and Lidia is a great teacher, as you will see. She's a chef who cares deeply about ingredients, and in her first dish, risotto with wild mushrooms, she uses arborio rice, which looks like this. It has a pearl of starch in the center, and that's necessary for the rice to retain its texture and to hold the flavors that are going into it. The results speak for themselves, a risotto to dream about.
When one talks about the Italian table, pasta always comes to mind as the main staple. But certainly rice is a second runner-up. And today we're going to do risotto, and risotto with wild mushrooms. Now, to do a proper risotto, you need the proper rice, which is the arborio rice. This is
Okay. So, well, I know arborio. I know and love arborio rice also because my dad and my mother were born in Arborio, the
Oh, were
village.
they?
Yes. Very few people know that Arborio is also a village.
yeah,
it's
yeah.
a city. Yeah.
Like Gorgonzola is a city, you know.
Exactly. So anyway, that show was shot in your kitchen, in your
In
real
my
kitchen.
kitchen.
And how excited were you about this
Well-
relationship with Julia Child and this?
Was an extraordinary involvement. Actually, we remained friends until she passed a few years ago. In that restaurant where I became the chef for Lidia, as I said, a lot of the journalists came, but so did Julia Child came in with James Beard for one evening, and that's how it began. She loved the risotto. She wanted to know how to cook it. She came to my house, and ultimately she asked me to appear on her show, the MasterChef series, and we did 2 episodes. And the producer, of course, says, Lidia, you know, you're pretty good. How about a show of your own? And that's 20 years ago that I started. And Julia encouraged me all the way. She says, Lidia, you do for Italian cuisine what I did for French cuisine, and just go and do it. And she mentored me along the way, really enforced me. When the producer asked me, I asked for 2 things. One, that I be on PBS because I think that was the platform that I felt most comfortable with. And secondly, that we film it in my house. Only because I was not used to studios, and I figured my house, I know my oven, my stove, my everything, I'm going to be comfortable. And that's where it began 20 years ago.
Yeah. And still going on very successfully.
Yes.
So talking about TV shows about food, what do you think about the evolution from the MasterChefs with Julia Child to your show to the current competition where chefs and jurors shout at each other, they throw pans?
Yes, I think that, you know, I have objections to a lot of them, but I think as a whole, this bringing forth this interest in the American lifestyle of food, of fresh food, of food being cooked, of cooking food for your family, seeing food as a real nourishment and awareness. Because if you're aware about food, you're aware about your nourishment, you're aware about your environment, and everything, it's a segue of one or the others to appreciate. So I think in that light, it is very positive, all of the shows that are about food, whether it's, you know, competition or whatever. it's a first step for somebody to get into the kitchen or with food, and hopefully from then on they get more and more involved and start cooking. So I think it's positive. I think that America is on a rebound, if you will, or rebirth, or rediscovering of healthy food, good food, preparing food, but also food seasonal, what I remember with my grandmother. The locality being close, now I see this. I don't want to cook. I want to cook with favas, with peas, with artichokes. This is the time of the year for that. And I think that, it's getting into the rhythm. And what that does, it makes food certainly healthier, but cheaper. If you're going to fly food 2,000 miles, it's got to have a price. And, you respect your environment more if you realize, where your food is coming. And especially children, knowing that, a chicken nugget, if you will, is part of a chicken. It's not something out of the plastic or whatever. And I think these are all very valid. And the evolution is more and more refined. I think more people pay more and more attention to the right cooking, the right food.
So you think it's positive also, all the obsession about food on Instagram?
I think
sometimes
Instagram
people take more picture in a restaurant about the food than...
Well, Instagram, this immediate communication is another phenomenon. And food is almost the common denominator for everybody. So, you can relate with food to anybody. So this phenomena of being able to communicate and reach so many people for wannabe writers or wannabe, it's a great place. And the largest, I think, common denominator is food. So put the two together and you get all these bloggers that know everything about food. And in a way, I find it fun.
You cooked for 2 popes here in New York. In 2008 for Pope Benedict XVI and in 2015 for Pope Francis. Which pope is more of a gourmet?
That's unfair. That's like asking me, they were both. But anyway, I'll go one by one.
Okay.
So, I guess first maybe how do you get chosen to cook for a pope? There's a lot of good chefs out there, beyond Lidia. And I think that my connection came, as I said, I did a lot of, and I still do, with the UN in fundraising and so, and the Celestino Migliore, who was the nuncio, the Vatican nuncio to the United Nations for a long period of time, got to know me and asked me, and I did some things also for the Curie and for them. And so when the Pope was coming, he came, he says, "Lidia, would you cook for the Pope?" And I really laughed, I said, sure I would. But I didn't think I would. And the Pope was coming, and, the discussion ensued. And the question was, okay, Pope Benedict, what will we cook for him? So I had to be in connection with the Vatican. You send a proposed menu. The Pope stays in the nuncio's house, residence, eats there. They do not eat in restaurants or in hotels. And so we, the team, entered and were in the nuncio's house, in this brownstones on 72nd Street. And you have the kitchen downstairs, the dining room, the reception hall. Upstairs is the bedroom where the Pope slept and had his little chapel. So it's like being in the family. We were downstairs cooking, he was upstairs sleeping, and so on. So it kind of, the grandeur of it, or the challenge, was slowly minimized. And food was kind of, again, the thing that connected us. I was there cooking, he was smelling it up there, and I was gonna feed him, and he was hungry for lunch. So we had a lot of common denominators there. But he's German, and I did a little research, of course, and his mother was a chef. And so I said, well, he likes his food. He knows his food. And of course, being German, and in the area that I come from, there's the Slavic, the Germanic influence, all of it. I pulled out my Germanic kind of card. So I made for him spätzle, goulash, strudel, what else? Sauerkraut. And you know, he really appreciated it. I saw him really eating and appreciating. And even when because, you know, I would come and serve him, whatever. The last night he had, it was his birthday and an anniversary of his papacy. And we brought him the cake, and we put the cake in front of him, and you know, he was either talking or not really doing anything. I put the knife in his hand, you know, give him the knife, and he's standing there, and I'm standing up here. So I just took his hand and the knife, and we cut the cake. And then and he looked at me. He said, but, you know, it was kind of a natural thing to, it was, just came, and he really, his smile was very serene and very accepting. And it was kind of a nice moment of just being simple people around a good occasion with some good food. So I really enjoyed him. Now, Pope Francis, a few years later, Argentina, I thought I was going to make a nice prime rib of beef, the whole thing, all 7 ribs or whatever, and bring it to the table, impress them. But the Vatican nixed me. They said, no, he needs to be light, whether his stomach or he was trying to be on a diet, I wasn't sure. But then my second step was, well, he's Piemontese, from the region of Piemonte. They like the risotto. I made a nice capon stock. I mean, I made the agnolini in brodo, and I made some good fish, light fish, and lots of vegetables. And he enjoyed it, and he was happy. For dessert, I kept it light. Crostate di frutta, you know, regular, simple, seasonal crostata. I think it was plums and peaches at that time. But one afternoon, he had come from his lunch, his morning event, had lunch, and was resting upstairs. And the staff was sitting downstairs in the kitchen, and we were talking, having our coffee, planning dinner. Now, the Pope would take a rest and then go out for his afternoon and then come back for dinner. But all of a sudden, you know, through the back service door, this white gown comes, and he comes right in the kitchen. The Secret Serviceman running after him, il Papa, il Papa, il Papa. He's known to get away from them. And so, but he came through the back door, and he stayed with us. He said, posso avere un caffè con voi? He did. He had a coffee. He spoke to each one of the workers, blessed them, gave them each rosemary beads. And then he left about 20 minutes after, and he said, pray for me. He asked us to pray for him. And so that was very moving that, you know, somebody that you would ask to pray for you ultimately puts you on the same level, maybe even higher, by asking you to pray for him. So it was very moving. I sent him the book, so let's see what he thinks about it.
Great. You are also a partner of Italy. Which has become, I think, the 3rd most visited attraction in New York City after the Metropolitan Museum and the Empire State Building.
Yes.
Did you have to adapt the Oscar Farinetti's business model to the American market and taste, or not?
No, I think that the beauty of it, because it was really genius what he came up with. And, you know, the first Italy was open in Torino. And I would go for the Carlo Pietrini Slow Food Movement convention every year. And that year I decided I'm going to go see Italy, and I made an appointment with Oscar. I wanted to meet him. I wanted to see what the concept was. The concept is brilliant in the fact that Oscar collaborated with Pietrini, and in the store were all the products of these Italian food artisans that were about, you know, they were afraid that the tradition would be lost or whatever, gave them a new venue, a new energy. But the beauty of it was that, you know, all the real traditional products of Italy were in the store. Now, that was a great concept, and I said, if we can do that, that would be great. But also, beyond that, he had the fresh just like here, fresh market, fresh fish, fresh the butcher, a restaurant that cooked the butcher, just like this here. What we did here, I think we took the concept, and we have here 55,000 square feet downtown, and we added more, I think, of the eating capabilities, opportunities. You can have the Lavazza Cafe, you can have the gelatos, you can have your just the crudo area and all of that. So did we embellish? No, because the message is Italian food as it is in Italy. The part that came really part of the American contribution is that whether you have vegetables, fish, meat, you need local purveyors. You can't be flying that the mere concept of respect, so that you can. So we, being in the restaurant industry, had all this connection, because that's what a chef does. Is the research is more, because the product is more significant, I feel, than even the chef. If you don't have a good product, there's not much that a chef can do. And so we had all that research, so we combined all our connections with the local, whether it's cheesemongers, fruit purveyors, in New England for the lobsters, the clams, the West Coast for the salmon. We combined all of this, and so that the store really represents, yes, the traditional Italian style with the flavors, with the products, but also the philosophy of the local purveyors.
At Italy, there is also La Scuola with cooking classes for adults and also for children. And I must thank you because we started a few years ago the program Mangia Sano e Parla Italiano, Eat Healthy and Speak Italian with the Italian American Committee on Education. So how can we teach children to eat well?
I think, it has to start recognition, the same thing, knowing where food comes from and understanding. And also cooking at homes. A child, should I speak?
No, go on.
So a child begins to build its
sorry, that is a picture of you at a school in Harlem. We did a program together, you remember? Mm-hmm. Teaching, talking about food and
yes.
Italy,
reading
language.
The story,
yes, reading. I think it was the Nonna book.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they sang an Italian song for me.
Exactly. Sorry, go on.
No, I think a child is, this consciousness of food. A child, when it's in the grembo of the mother, if you will, it begins already. Whatever the mother eats, it kind of collects those flavors. And as a newborn child recognizes its mother by the smell. So the smell is very important. So if you cook at home cauliflower or cabbage or broccoli, which has that sulfur intensity, a child, even though it might be a neonato, picks up and already collects those flavors as, something that he recognizes. And so it's very important that a child, not when they become 12 years old, you teach them to eat the broccoli, but that along the way, there's a balance of exposure mm-hmm. and of tastings when the child wants in growing up. And certainly they need to know where their food comes from and respect the food, in that way. Respect the animals, respect, yes, an animal is sacrificed to nourish us. But that sacrifice needs to be respected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that you go every year to Italy to do more research, and you have traveled. You have traveled all the regions.
All of them.
In all these years, how have you see Italy changing?
I think that Italy. What frightened me when I go into the big department stores and I go into the freezers. I see what are they freezing in Italy. And I must say that it has remained a constant. I think it's maybe more a question of economy, of price. Like you see some frozen shrimps, you see some frozen, but it's not something, frozen foods, like whole aisles of frozen foods. Italy, I was afraid that it would kind of lose this contact, this, you can't go shopping every every morning as, you know, a housewife would or used to. Some still do in Italy, but still the food is fairly fresh, prepared. I think there is convenience food, but I think always with a consciousness. I think one of the big problems in societies, big societies like this, is a big industry, where the big industry takes over. And this happened in America because, you know, the women after World War II went to work and delegated the responsibility, the way sort of, and big industry will, you know, ultimately the bottom line has to be green, it can't be red, so they have to make money. So now I think this retro kind of assessing, and it's not easy, it's not an easy track because the food industry is the second largest employer in the United States. So you can't stop a running train. What are you going to do with all these people? So, you know, if you put legislation and all of that, you can't stop all at once. I think it basically comes down education, a slow progress, and on the consumer. The consumer really has to be informed, has to go out there and shop and put their money where the truth is, what they believe in. And that will, in effect, give a response to big industry. If their products is not being bought, they will change it. And so it's a long process, but it is happening. So, you know, if you go out, buy the small farmers, buy the, you know, no hormone-free, buy all of those, you know, no pesticides as much as you can, because it's healthier for you, it's healthier for the environment. And usually in those cases, you know, you might pay a little more, but the flavor, you need less to deliver the satisfaction. So, yeah, I think.
Yeah. So my last question. At the end of the book, I quote you right. In a way, I still feel like Giuliana and Lidia. I am part of two of the greatest cultures in the world, Italian and American. The Italians have a long history, art, a love of life, and food. As an American, part of a new country, rich and shiny, I learned how to think like a businesswoman and to reach for the stars, unquote. Yeah. So what's your final message with your book?
Well, my final message, because along the way, each kind of hurdle, I have learned something, and I express that philosophy of life, if you will, you know, along each. So, you know, what regarding children, regarding teaching, regarding the elderly generation, you know, I think that, you know, the elders have so much to give. I have my mother, as I said, 97 years old, so much wisdom, so much unconditional love, and yet sometimes they're put away. The children, on the other hand, need love, need attention. Why don't we put the two together already, you know? I mean, things like that. So, you know, it's some little common sense. But I think the basic here is the story of a young family faced with adversity as an immigrant, the opportunity that we received in America is self-explanatory. I just, you know, want to share it, that the goodness of people, of an acceptance, sort of makes people that need, that want it even more and make it happen even more. So it's non-political, you know, certainly this is a political time, but I think it's a story that is parallel to what's happening today, and it ends positive. And I just wanted to put it out there to see, you know, positive things did happen, will happen, and do happen.
Grazie, Lidia. I think we have time for a few questions from the audience before going for the signing of the books. Okay, first one over there. Do we have other mics or?
I can speak loudly.
Okay.
Hi, Lidia.
Hi.
Hi, Lidia. I love your line at the end of your cooking shows, tutta tavola a mangiare. That line is so robust and holds so much for me coming from an Italian family, because I had to be at the table a mangiare or else. So I would like to know what that line holds for you, and if we all were tutta tavola a mangiare, would it be a better world and some social issues would be
I think, yeah.
solved.
Absolutely. I think it has a meaning that at the table is a very special place, and we all have to make an effort. And, setting up a table and cooking and, 10, 12 people, it's not an easy task. But, somebody has to do it, and it has to, it must be continued. We can't all, you have to put effort in a cause, in something to succeed, to make it worthwhile. And I think the table is one of the easiest and the most worthwhile places for everybody to be. So, tutti a tavola a mangiare, it's a mangiare in my dialect, let's and or butta la pasta. Those were the two signals that you had to be at the table at a certain time.
I'm surprised that sometimes I don't find tables in American houses. There are no tables.
I'm trying.
Over there, Vincenzo. Yeah. Quale frase?
Thank you, Ms. Bastianich, for this amazing talk. Two things. I'm very happy that to see Julia Child mention this. She's part of the American history of food industry and education. You come after. What do you think is the message that the large American public took from your experience, from your achievements? What do you teach them? Or better, what do they take from your experience in the food industry?
So I get many reverberances, if you will, many emails, many writings, meeting in the street, comments like this. And there are many different aspects that each one kind of takes what they feel they need. There's a lot about the family. There's a lot about this transgenerational community that I have. And it's not because I'm filming. My mother does live with me, my daughter with the 2 kids down the block. So the grandkids, they're away at college, but they already made a date when I'm filming. Grandma, we're going to be there. And so I think that they connect to that, to the family connection. There's a lot of connection to the generational. Grandma, great-grandma, grandma, and the children, and the nipoti. So I think eating at the table, I get so many emails saying, Lidia, I set the table now, I put this, and you encourage me. So the encouragement. Now, I only profess the Italian cuisine because that's all I know. I don't know, I'm not, but along with that, there's a lot of techniques, there's a lot of philosophy, there's a lot of recognition of products, how to use it, and everything. And in all of that, even though I am a restaurant chef where food becomes a little bit more elaborated, when I go on television in my books, I really minimize it and make it lean and make it very accessible. I want them to cook. I want my flavors, the Italian flavors, to be in their house because I know that they will be delighted, they will be rewarded, and they will be happy. And when they tell me last night we had a Lidia meal, just to know that my flavors are someplace in the middle of America, wherever that email, it rewards me a lot. So it's a give and take. The more that I am kind of asked to give, the more I want to give, and hence my book, and hence the television. And one would say, Lidia, what else do you have on the agenda? I continue doing the television series. Not only that, they love when I go to Italy. So go back. I'm going to be going to Italy this year to do some filming there to bring them the reality of Italy. Some people might never go to Italy, but with me they do. They go and they enjoy it. So there's many different things. I'm just listing out the different things that I get the feedback of. Also, the recognition from the industry as a whole. 2 days ago, I just got my Emmy, another Emmy for the show. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, from James Beard, the award for another of my specials. So there's recognition out there that what I do resonates, and they love it, and they encourage me to do more and more.
Thank you. Other question?
Lydia, I'd like to say thank you for feeding me some of the best meals I've ever had, and also inspiring me to cook some of the best meals I've ever been able to cook. So thank you.
My pleasure.
But when you, if you ever have a day off, who cooks for you?
You know, I still love cooking. As I said, you know, my mother is with me, we cook. But the grandkids, so Lorenzo, who is my daughter's son, is a pretty good cook. And now and then, you know, he's away in college now, he's coming home. He offers to cook for me, and I love it. Sometimes the kids together. I mean, you know, I'm not really that demanding. I want a good product, and I want it simple.
And that's my next question. Are there foods, are there meals that you go back to? You could eat anything in the world on any day. Are there things that you go back to as your comfort food or your familiar food?
Well, sure, you know, it's Italian, and I say, you know, my comfort food has got to be pasta. And I don't need, a great kind of thinking of the recipe. I just open the refrigerator door. Let's see what I have in there. It could be a garlic, anchovies. It could be prosciutto. It could be anything. And, great plate of pasta with some peperoncino, even though up where I come from, we use black pepper. I love peperoncino. So, as you know.
Anybody else? Here.
Lidia, thank you very much. You cook for two popes, any presidents?
Yes, President Bush, Laura Bush, Mattarella, and our president, the present president of Italy, Berlusconi, past president. So yes, quite a few of the presidents passed through the restaurants, and I had opportunities.
Over there.
Lydia, I want to thank you because you're so incredibly inspiring. And I just want to ask you, this book, did you have any element of hesitation? I mean, to share your life story is quite a gift to people. Why did you write it now? Like, did you have this on your timetable? Was there something that happened that you said, now I want to share my story?
Okay, a beautiful voice, a beautiful singer. She sings in many of our Italian. Thank you. Exactly. Was it? Yes, I wasn't quite ready. I didn't think that this was, but given the time, I always knew that I was going to put it all down because it's a story to be told. It's, it's part of a history of our world. That's certainly of my time. And I wanted certainly my children and my grandchildren to know that, even though I took them through every step of the book that they know, they've been there. I told them, I took them to the camp, I took them because I want them to know, I want them to really appreciate what they have and not take for granted. So I knew I had things that, as I would travel or go back to that courtyard or whatever, memories resurface. I would put them down and just put them in the computer. And ultimately, I think that the time it was ripe now, given the world situation, much more. I would have done it maybe in another 5 years, but I was ready to do it, yes. And as far as telling, either you tell the truth or there's no need of telling it, I mean, because this is not just my story. It's a story, I think, of history, of a period of time, of the people of that area and what they went through. And it's a story of immigrants coming, and how it's a story, also a human story. It's very much how people helping each other really makes a big difference, and it perpetuates this feeling of what we don't have enough today.
Thank you so much, Lydia. I
Thank
think
you.
that we can finish here. And again, the last, Monica Manet, yes. So Lydia will be there signing books, and before leaving you, I want to tell you that the next and last conversation with outstanding Italian women in America will be next week, Thursday, 10th of May, with Monica Mandelli, who is a top manager at Wall Street, and her story, I think, will be very